Hi, everyone. I'm Coach Mark, and I really want to welcome you to this year's very special virtual edition of Personifest. It's a real pleasure to have so many people here. And personally, I'm actually very excited about it because there were only a few of you that I would actually have the chance to speak to at the live Personifest. But in this way, I know that there are hundreds of registrants and that I actually can offer some advice to a lot of people. So I'm really pleased for you to be here. I'm so sorry that we're doing it in this format, but I do hope that everybody is at least comfortable and having something of a good time so far. So in this session, we're going to be talking about multi-chapter management with Wild Apricot. And because this is Personifest, and there are a couple of other types of products and people that may be here as a result. I'm talking about Personified Community, Personified 360, maybe you're an A to Z events client, but you're definitely in the right place if you are looking to expand your ability to allow your members to manage their digital community. So we're going to talk about multi-chapter management with Wild Apricot in a context that's going to be useful not only if you're coming from one of those other products, but also if you are already a Wild Apricot user and you're looking to expand your ability to use the software. So as some of you may know, but others may not, I'm Coach Mark, and I started with Wild Apricot back in 2015. So it's been a fun couple of years there. But really, I've really kind of made my career and my entire passion in life about helping others. And from the very first moments that I became a tutor and was able to apply my ability as a coach and ability to help teach and mentor and help really kind of anyone towards their goals. I've been able to apply that here at Wild Apricot as well. So you may have seen me at some of the other Personifests in person, or you may have seen me at some other Wild Apricot events in the past years, but you have definitely seen me on things like the Wild Apricot Bootcamp, which we'll be talking about a little bit later, and some of the other webinars that we do in-house here. I also have a couple other sessions here at Personifest. I think this one does come first, so make sure you check those out as well. So here is the schedule for today's particular multi-chapter session. There are a couple of things I want to talk about, and first and foremost, I do plan to talk about Wild Apricot as a solution. That's because there may be people here that may not have experience with Wild Apricot yet. They may be coming from one of those other products like I mentioned, or maybe they're new administrators or new board members to your community. So we're going to briefly talk about what Wild Apricot can do for you. But then, of course, we're going to go into specifics about chapter management. And there are a number of different approaches here, all of which I'm going to show you and try and detail as best as I possibly can. So that's where there'll be a lot of meat and potatoes for this particular session. And then, of course, we're going to talk about some of the resources that already exist on Wild Apricot and how you can use those resources to really benefit your members, your chapter admins, people down the road that may come on as board members or volunteers, and really everything that we can do at Personifying Wild Apricot to be able to help you. And last but not least, we'll talk about some of the next steps as well as do a little bit of Q&A. Now, I'm not quite sure in what format I may be here answering questions, but I have a sneaking suspicion that I'm somewhere off to the side right now where you can actually get in touch and send me questions. But if I'm not, and we are doing a question and answer period at the end of the session, then I plan to leave a little bit of time so that we actually have the opportunity to do that. Now, first and foremost, let's talk about Personify's Wild Apricot and how it can help you as an all-in-one membership management solution. Really, the goal here is to try and get each of your chapters using a solution like this so that they have the ability to manage their entire digital presence, as well as all of the things like renewals and automation of registrations and donations, and the ability to send an unlimited amount of emails all in one place. If everybody can do it and they have that power at their fingertips and an easy all-in-one solution, it enables those chapters to really run well. And of course, it's going to help those of you at the national level to be able to report better from your chapters. But first and foremost, Wild Apricot at a glance has been around for over 13 or 14 years now. I'm actually starting to lose count, but it is a very common question, so I thought I would answer it right away. Wild Apricot, the name for the software, was actually drawn from a hat years and years and years ago. It doesn't really have a very grandiose story as to why it was conceived. I think it was just one of very many suggestions, but it did happen to win that particular lottery, and that's why it stuck around. But otherwise, Wild Apricot has been the #1 membership management solution in the market for about 7 years in a row now. And when you add that all together, it means that we are able to service about 24,000 communities, which actually equals about 10 million members in total when you factor in all of the people that they serve there. So it's something that we're very proud of, and thank you so much for being a part of that family. Wild Apricot is a cloud-based solution, so you don't actually have to install anything to make Wild Apricot work. Anybody from your organization, be they admins or members, is able to log into Wild Apricot as long as they have an internet connection. Wild Apricot's all mobile ready. Most of the pages and most of the functionality is mobile responsive, which means people can view it on any size screen that they like. And because you don't have to install anything, nobody has to visit on site to get anything set up, and almost every single thing can be done virtually. It makes it so that you don't have to have dedicated staff for purposes like this, and you don't have to bug a technical person all of the time if you just want to make website updates. So that's really where Wild Apricot shines and enables people to really have that ability to manage their digital presence for their organization. When I'm talking about manage, I'm talking about some of the features that Wild Apricot does best. Now, you may have heard me say that we are a membership management solution, and that is exactly true. But what does that really mean? Well, you can see some of the features that Wild Apricot does best on the side of your screen right now, or on your screen right now. But I'm really talking about the automation of things like membership renewals and applications, and the ability for people to make things like donations or registrations to events. And automation in this context means that when you set up the permissions and policies on your end, such as people are allowed to renew 30 days in advance, and when they do, they'll receive this type of email notice from the organization, then you as an administrator don't really have to be there anymore. In fact, you can go, well, I guess maybe not in this environment, but you can definitely go to a different room. I normally say the beach, but you can definitely go to a different room in the house and definitely just relax, because Wild Apricot is going to take care of all of that automation for you. So for example, when somebody's renewal is upcoming, it will send them a notice. They'll be able to click a link and then go ahead and pay it online. And you coupled it with all of the other features that Wild Apricot actually has, like those event registrations, donations, and a built-in website builder and host, and it really makes a one-stop kind of shop for small to medium-sized organizations when they're looking to run a digital presence. And when you're talking about managing your members, you're really talking about the sort of information that you're able to keep for your members. Information is power, and the more of it you're collecting from your applicants and registrants and other members, the more you can do with it. For example, if you have information about when people may need to renew their membership, you can go ahead and send them invoices in advance. Or if you have the information on who may be interested in certain types of events, you can invite them to those events, and then I suppose invite them to become members. Wild Apricot as a custom database allows you to put any sort of information into the system that you would like to collect from those members. You can have them attach photos. You can have them fill in the kinds of things they may be interested in, or the last year that they had certification. Whatever kind of questions your organization may ask, you can have appear on Wild Apricot. And of course, that data can be used in so many different ways. You can organize it in different ways that your administrators can report on it better. And it makes it so that you can really look up records easily and have a really good pulse on the actual people that are part of your organization. I mentioned a little bit earlier about website management, and it's something that Wild Apricot really does well to set us apart from a lot of the other solutions out there. Built right into Wild Apricot on every single account is an entire web presence, and you're able to use that web presence to build website pages and have them hosted as part of your account. So a lot of organizations will in fact build their entire web presence on Wild Apricot. All of the updates flow directly from the database into the site. People can visit it, they can log in. You can even restrict contents that only members are able to access certain types of things, all within the program itself. Now, Wild Apricot does work if you're using it externally too. The database can work on the back end in sort of a silent administrator capacity while you host things like application forms as widgets on external sites. There are plenty of organizations doing it both ways, and both solutions do work. So the ability to play with Wild Apricot's website management and its forms and all the built-in widgets really gives you a lot of power there too. Now, we also talked briefly about event coordination with Wild Apricot because it really helps there. The ability to create different types of events with different ticket options like bronze, silver, gold, and also do things like have complicated event registration functionality like wait lists, guest registrations, and all sorts of other customization options means that your organization can run an event quite easily and quite smoothly, and virtually anybody can make one. As long as they have an administrative privilege and they have 5 minutes to learn, they should find it very easy with something like Wild Apricot. I mentioned email campaigns, and that's something that Wild Apricot does extremely well. Wild Apricot allows you to send an unlimited amount of outbound emails. So anytime you do need to stay in touch with your members, you can send them an email in just a few minutes. And a lot of those emails are actually automated too. So you may have heard me mention the renewal policies for your memberships or things like event registration, which have a lot of automated emails attached to them. So when somebody registers for an event, they can automatically receive an email with details to that event. Or when their membership renewal is upcoming, you can customize what kind of email you actually want to send to that user, whether it's asking them nicely not to forget about you come renewal time, or maybe something a little bit more strongly worded. It's up to you. But you're also able to send custom and on-demand emails with Wild Apricot. So if you have a newsletter or you want to reach out to your members in some other way, you can send that email at any time. Wild Apricot will track who opens it, who it's sent to, and you'll be able to go and look at those stats as well, so you have a really good idea of your engagement. Other features on Wild Apricot include things like the online store, a relatively new feature, but something that's really fun for organizations to be able to open up a little bit of an e-commerce retail operation. So if you find yourself with a lot of merchandise that you want to be able to offer to your members, Wild Apricot's online store will let you actually allow people to purchase it. And you can do some things like offer special members pricing, as well as customize things like different inventory options or the available stock that you have for an item, and automatically attach things like shipping costs so that people know exactly how much the purchase may be. And this online store I've seen used really creatively as well. There are some uses that are a little bit more common, like I've seen people sell organization merchandise, hats, shirts, things like that. But I've also seen people use it for slightly more creative purposes. Like, for example, if you have somebody in your organization that is approaching a jubilee of membership, perhaps they have been a member for 25 years now, I've seen people use the online store to be able to purchase that person like a plaque, for example, if you want to be able to commemorate the event. So it's something that's really fun. It's built into every single account, just like everything with Wild Apricot. So definitely take a look, and if you have any retail or e-commerce that you need to get out there to your members, then I think Wild Apricot can help you there. And I've mentioned a couple of times the ability to be able to take payments online, such as for membership renewals or event registrations, or however your members may want to be contributing costs, such as purchasing things from the store. While Apricot does allow you to to take payments online, whether they be one-time payments or recurring ones for things like donations or membership renewals. We integrate with a couple of payment processors, and we also have one built right into the system by way of Wild Apricot Payments. And that's been around for a couple of years now, which has really enabled us to be able to serve people like you a lot better because we can have a full cycle approach to how we're able to actually support your account. So you'll be able to attach an online payment processor, bill people in almost any single currency, and be able to allow people of any country to be able to pay that invoice as well. And when you couple this in with most of the automation of Wild Apricot, it really makes it easy and fun to organize and run a community like this when there's not so much work that you have to do because you set it up and everything's happening kind of like clockwork. Another fun feature is the ability to have polls, elections, or surveys in Wild Apricot. You can define a poll or a survey, create a custom link, and send it to people who you need to answer that particular poll. So I've seen this used for some creative purposes because you can do things like customize who is able to answer versus who is able to actually see that survey. That way you can kind of have stakeholders respond, but you can see or have the entire organization still see the survey itself. It's also obviously very good for things like elections since it is privatized and you can send a private link to people so that the survey is not available public. It's also useful for things like just getting a temperature check from your community. Where should we host our next event, or what would be a good topic for our next virtual meeting? Things like that are excellent candidates for the poll feature. Now, digital membership cards are also built right into Wild Apricot, and these are kind of fun. It'll let you create a template in which you can define what happens, and it'll pull information for individual members and fill in that card for them. Now, these are digital membership cards, so there's no real way to get them printed unless you have a method on your end. But what your users and members will be able to do is have the card available to them. That way they can download it to their phone and be able to show it at events or maybe print it themselves and attach it to a nice little badge. So this is something that's built in. You can customize it completely, and it's just one of many fun features of Wild Apricot. Another one is the mobile app, and we actually have two mobile apps available. There's the admin app, which is a great app for being able to do things like take registrations at the door of events. You're able to swipe credit cards so that you can take payments, and you can also check people in for attendance or scan their QR code on their event registration so that you actually know that they've attended the event. It does a really great job at all of those things and makes it so that you don't have to drag a computer around if you do want to manage things at the gate. The other app is a Wild Apricot members app, and this is designed for your members to be able to download so that they have a really good idea of their own participation with your community. The members app is going to allow them to edit their own profile information, see any events that they've registered to, and be able to contribute to those, as well as lastly, they will be able to see the membership directory, which will allow them to find other members and stay in touch and keep your community going. So these are all built in. They're absolutely free of charge, and anybody is welcome to both the member and the admin app. You'll find both, I think, on both the Android store and the so one's Google Play and the other one is Apple Store, but you will be able to find versions for both the iPhone and Android. I guess you can tell that I'm an Android user myself since I know the name of that one and not the other one, but you'll be able to find it anyway. And if you do want to tell me in the comments what it is, I'm sure I'll get a couple responses there. Now, before we start talking about multi-chapter stuff, I just want to let you know that Wild Apricot also realizes that in trying to offer you a software that's designed to save you time and effort and money, you're hopefully going to have a lot more time to be able to focus on things that are important for yourself and your organization. So for years, we've offered a lot of knowledge and best practice advice about how to run membership organizations, how nonprofits can benefit from certain types of information, and basically a slew of information that we hope is best used by persons like yourself to develop professionally as well as continue to offer services to your members. So you'll find all sorts of information on Wild Apricot's page. You'll find expert webinars that we put on monthly. You'll find tons of blog articles and expert advice. And I really highly recommend it because it's a huge passion for us and something that we are very, very happy to be able to offer to you so that you can serve your members even better. To go over pricing for Wild Apricot quickly, in case you are thinking about it or some of your chapters are thinking about Wild Apricot, this solution is priced based on the size of the database itself. So if your community, for example, had about 230 people, and that's factoring all of the admins, the members, donors, anybody in the database that you would want to manage and stay in contact with, if you had about 250 people, then you would fit into the group plan, which does cover up to 250 people. And as you can see, that's about $50 US a month. Now, Wild Apricot goes all the way up to about 50,000 contacts, although that is the upper limit. So if you do have a community with users greater than 50,000, you may be looking at something like Personify 360 or Personify Community. I would think those would be better solutions for a community of that size. However, when we're talking multi-chapter organizations and smaller, medium, mid, all of those fun words, when we're talking pricing for them and solutions for them, Wild Apricot is certainly the right ballpark. So as with anything, there are always options to ask more questions here. We have a ton of coaches available for any sort of questions you may have with Wild Apricot. And we'll talk a little bit more about how this can impact your multi-chapters or your affiliates in just a moment. I just wanted to give you an idea of what the pricing actually looks like. Now on to section 2 of the webinar. We're going to talk about different approaches to chapter management with Wild Apricot. Now I want to offer you a few scenarios, and I'm going to take a drink as I do this because my throat is a little dry. But a brief disclaimer, this was certainly intended to be a slightly different conversation in an in-person Personifest environment. In that scenario, I'm sure that we may have had 4 or 5 days to build on conversations like this and explore scenarios for your community. That being said, this is obviously a little bit different than what I had in mind, so I have modified the original presentation, and I'm hoping that there are enough crumbs here of every possible solution that no matter what perspective you find yourself coming from, you will be able to find a solution here. The other thing I've done is I've put more information on how to run Wild Apricot in a multi-chapter environment without having to look at really complicated solutions. So there is definitely something here for everyone, and I want to give you a couple of ideas of who is probably in this session with you right now. So I do know that many of you are probably Wild Apricot customers, but there are also a number of you who might have their national organization already with something like Personify 360. I've met a couple dozen of you. I've worked with a couple dozen of you. I know that you are out there. And what happens there is with a national organization being on a bigger solution like Personify 360, the chapters don't necessarily have their own individual digital space to run chapter operations. So in that scenario, or likewise when some local chapters are on Wild Apricot, but the national is not on P360, I found, and what you may find yourself, is that there's often a little bit of a broken telephone where different chapters are using different solutions, all sorts of different softwares being thrown around, and there's really little harmony there. So that's a common scenario. I'm sure that will speak to some of you. Other ones that may speak to other users in the channel are those of you who are with A to Z events and are looking for a way to complete the circle there by including a registration component. Wild Apricot is definitely a great job for that. We've already had a number of examples of successful integrations there. So if you are in the room, you're very welcome as well. And then lastly, another scenario that's been creeping up more and more often is for those of you who are looking to integrate Personify Community with Wild Apricot's membership management and renewal components, as well as adding a single sign-on capability so that users only have to sign in once. These are just based on my experience. I know that the majority of you are probably Wild Apricot customers, so these are really for those of you who are other Personify family and you're just finding Wild Apricot for the first time. If you are already a Wild Apricot customer, or you're not yet and you're considering it for your chapters, then a more common scenario is that chapters are looking for their own digital space, but the organization controls the database. Or as you can see on screen, oftentimes national organizations will fund the chapter development of these digital communities, but they don't necessarily do the administrative work. So it still relies on the chapter admins or volunteers from that chapter to actually go about and set up a solution like this. Another one that's very common is that increasingly more and more chapters are looking to share aspects of their reporting. And what's kind of fun here is that every organization seems to have different priorities and different needs. So it's very hard to imagine in advance what organizations may want to share. But I am seeing more people look at being able to pass information from one Wild Apricot account to another, for example, or find a way to actually report on multiple Wild Apricot accounts. Perhaps in a scenario where all of that information is funneling up to national. So those, I hope, will appeal to those who I missed on the previous slide. So some typical approaches here, based on everything I've seen in the past and based on sort of best practices, would be to approach it in one of a few ways. If you are a multi-chapter organization and you're looking to house all of your data in one place so that all of your admins can see it, everybody can respond the same way, and basically national or whichever organization is controlling that, but basically they would have full visibility, full oversight of that particular, that entire account. That is a typical approach. I see many people attempt it that way, and we're going to talk a little bit on how to do that in a best practice sort of environment in just a second. The other approach is deploying Wild Apricot to each of your chapters so that they effectively have their own compartmentalized site. Now, this, of course, can be used so that reporting can be sussed out and there can be a way to share information with whoever else needs it. But otherwise, that site would be self-contained. It would have its own administrators, its own database. Updates can be made there. Emails can be sent there, et cetera, et cetera. Other approaches, if you are looking at multiple Personify solutions, or if you have other software solutions out there that you do need to integrate with something like Wild Apricot in order to make a multi-chapter solution work, include things like manipulation of the API. Excuse me. Now, I know that API is a little bit more complicated than the average Wild Apricot task. And it is very true that we claim to be a very easy to use software. I think we are, but API is some of the more complex stuff that you can actually do with Wild Apricot. That being said, it is extremely, extremely powerful. And Wild Apricot enables you to be able to access so much of the data contained in your account with an API that you can effectively use it to do nearly anything. So if budget allows, and that's the sort of scope that you need for your project, then it's good to know that API and SSO and external integration solutions do exist. Otherwise, multi-chapter it's a mouthful. Wild Apricot multi-chapter discount pricing can be another way to make this manageable, especially if you're deploying Wild Apricot to multiple chapters. And I'll let you know how that works in just a moment, but the short answer there is that when you are considering Wild Apricot for dozens of chapters at a time, we want to be able to give you a way to benefit from that because quite frankly, you make my job easier by being able to get everybody on the same page, which means I can answer one question for 10 people. So we have discounts that we can offer you there. Now, I'm going to talk about those discounts in scenario 2, but scenario 1 right now is housing multiple chapters on a single Wild Apricot account. So over the years, I have definitely picked up a couple of tips here. And quite frankly, many of you have taught me these tips. So I'm not going to call out anybody by name, and I don't think I even could because there are honestly dozens of you. But I feel like many of you may know who you are and you may be smiling right now. But I learn a lot just from helping all of you. So thank you on behalf of the coaches. But anyhow, the approach that I wanted to draw your attention to here is the approach of using multiple templates. And really, I might have put multiple templates in site pages, but we'll call it multiple templates for now. You can kind of see what I mean on your screen here with the arrows that I've attempted to draw out. So what I've done in this scenario is kind of envisioned a community. In this case, it's called the multi-chapter organization, and I've made them a couple of chapters, namely the North, the East, the West, and the South chapters. Here, I've kind of presented it in such a way where if I were, let's say we were members of the public and we were visiting the multi-chapter organizations page, and we were interested in a chapter, we can actually arrange it so that we can see all of those options down the side of the screen. We can have the ability to create pages that would only be accessible to different types of chapter members. And I'll show you that on the next page here. I've kind of made it, oh, I think I might have to move my face. Just a moment. There we go. Yeah, so what I've done here is I've created 4 different types of areas for those chapter members. And I actually went so far as to create not only a separate site page on Wild Apricot for all of those different chapters, but I created a different template as well. And I'll show you why in just a second. But from a sort of overview perspective, you can see that we can still present it to our members and still present it to our chapters as if there is a lot of harmony there from the national organization. We could list them all separately. We could have separate links to them. We can still have application forms and all of the necessary information. Basically everything we need to make it look like a contiguous site on the outside, but then have those specialized chapter areas within the overall organization site. And because you can do things like limit administrative privileges, this also allows you to give people access just to certain pages of Wild Apricot. So your chapter admins, for example, you could give them access to their North chapter page. That way they don't really play with the South chapter page. And in this extremely abstract compass rose that I've tried to arrange here, you can see that I've laid out the North, the East, the South, and the West chapters, all with those extremely ad hoc but quick template jobs just to show that they would be different areas. And the reason that I've done this is because I sort of envision, and I've seen many of you put this into place, but I envision a scenario where, let's say I'm a member of the North chapter and I head to the multi-chapter page and I log in. After I log in, all of the template information, all of the branding, the graphics, all of the information I see with my eyes can then switch to the North chapter main page one. And that would just be for me and members of my other North chapter. That way I feel like I have a special zone within a site and I have member benefits, and I'm really kind of being catered to a little bit from the national organization down to me, the member of the chapter organization. And the reason that this works so well and again, I hope my face isn't covering the title, I think that's okay, is because it's a little bit of a little known feature in Wild Apricot. I see a lot of people use it, but not everybody. But you can define the starting page for your members. So in this scenario with the North, South, East, West chapters, what we can do is we can enable it so that after somebody has logged in, depending on what type of chapter member they are, they would then be redirected to that page. And as we saw in the previous slides, those pages have completely different templates. They have completely different graphics. Essentially, they are members-only pages within a members page. And this way, you can ensure that everybody gets directed to the right place. They don't see information that is not relevant to their particular chapter, but they can still see the skeleton or on the appendix, I should say, on the main site, as we showed a little bit earlier. They still know they're part of a multi-chapter organization, but as far as that member sees, they only really see their information. And in case you don't know, Wild Apricot absolutely allows you to restrict content based on somebody's membership level or group. And you can see that on the picture on the left side. In this case, we've just restricted this page to anybody in the South chapter. And obviously, people in the South chapter are getting redirected there, so they'll find themselves right at home. Another little tip here. I know the chapter one's pretty good and there may be some questions coming in, but again, I'm not sure what format they're coming in, so I'm just going to keep moving on with this. Another really cool tip that, again, I don't think a lot of people know exists, although many people know the event tags exist, not a lot of people know this particular feature exists, but are the event tags. Now, event tags are tags that you would apply, or terms you would apply to an event so that they can be grouped more easily. For example, all of your tutorials can be grouped under the tag tutorial. That way you can do things like make an event calendar that would only show those tutorial lessons. And that's built into Wild Apricot. When you do take something like the event calendar gadget and drag it onto your page, and if you click it, it'll show you the settings for that calendar gadget. And other settings, you can define which events it will actually show based on the tags that you've selected. So you can have it show all of those tutorial events, all of your events, or only some or certain types. It's really fun there. How that works in a chapter, multi-chapter environment, multi-chapter scenario is, if you are meticulous, or at least you try to be about tagging your events, then you can do things like make separate event calendars specifically on chapter pages that would only show those chapter events. Or you can go the complete other way, which is the super tip of the day, and you can custom or you can color code those events on your main organization's calendar. So if you want to have a calendar that shows all your chapter's events all in one place, that way everybody can see that your organization is thriving and is doing really well as a whole, you can use the tags to custom color them so that each organization maybe has a different color for their events. People can see them at a glance, and it can just look really nice. And because those are custom colors that you can actually define, you can brand them as well. So that's the tip that I don't see a lot of people do. I do see people using tags, but I don't see everybody using custom colors for the event tags. So I do believe that's on the help site, actually. So if you go to gethelp.wildapricot.org, I believe it is, and you go and search for event tags, it should be there. I think it's one of the last items on that list, but it's a really good tip. All right, this one is definitely a little bit more abstract, and for sure, it's not immediately obvious to a lot of people. So this is definitely going to be one of those Coach Mark tips. So if you've been to one of my sessions, you know what these are like. Anyway, so a little trick that I determined, or I discovered on Wild Apricot, is the ability to use the tax reporting for non-tax purposes. Now, just to step back really quickly, the tax functionality on Wild Apricot allows you to automatically attach sales taxes to things that you sell. So I'm in Ontario, we have a 13% tax here. In the system, I can define a 13% tax called HST, and I can have it automatically apply to invoices or be included in the total for that invoice, either one. But anyway, so that I can use it for tax purposes and then you can pay the government later. What I've discovered and what tip I want to share with you is that these taxes can also be repurposed for things that are relevant in a multi-chapter scenario, namely for kickbacks or kick-ups, kick-downs, whatever it is. And the way that you actually would facilitate that is by implementing something of a tax on the system. In this case, I've called it a national organization 10% fee. And as you can see from the example, I built it into the cost so that there's no additional cost on top. I don't want to upset my members. by suggesting that they're paying too much. I just want them to know that there is 10% or 10% of their costs, for example, will be passed up to national. So they are fulfilling that particular obligation. Likewise, this actually works in the inverse scenario too. So if people are all, if national kicks down to chapters, then you can use this same custom tax reporting. And I'm just doing the air brackets because it's not meant for this purpose, but it works really well. But anyway, the tax reporting in a multi-chapter scenario, if you're the national organization, catching my train of thought, you can have different taxes applying for different types of member, different chapter members, and then obviously included the same way. And what makes this really easy in the long run is that you'll notice that on the invoice itself, it doesn't really list the word taxes. It lists the custom field that you have put down there. So this can really be used for, kick-ups. You can put in admin fees, service fees, whatever it is that you need to do. It's a great place to do it. And how you can use that information as an administrator is in the standard tax reporting built right into Wild Apricot. You can really quickly and really easily at a glance see all of the taxes for any particular type of your commerce. In this case, it means that you can also share that information with the chapter, or you can share it up with the national organization. So you can give them really precise reporting on what it is you may owe them, or they may owe you, or whatever accounting needs you may have there. And you may mention, or you may remember a little bit earlier, I was talking about the power in something like API. Well, API can access a lot of this financial information on the back end of Wild Apricot. So if you have a a custom developer or programmer or somebody who's very dedicated and willing to roll up their sleeves and learn how that API stuff works, then they might be able to use this to automate a lot of the functionality there and make sure that you can get accurate financial detailing and reports for tax purposes, or at least the kickback purposes here. So it's just a suggestion. You can always do this reporting after the fact, but this is built right in. And, I think it's a neat little trick. And I mentioned earlier that there is the ability to make limited admins for Wild Apricot. You can kind of see that on your screen here. So in this example, I just made a couple of pages for the East chapter. You have your East events page, you have the East donations page, the alumni forums. And if I don't want my Eastern chapter admin to go messing with any of the other chapters, then you can see that you can just give them specific website access to just those pages. And that way they'll be able to access those pages exclusively. So I have critters running around my feet. All right. Now, there are a couple of disadvantages of using a single Wild Apricot account, and I want to be fully transparent about them because you may remember I spoke of the multi-chapter discount. There's a reason we offer a discount for using multiple Wild Apricot sites, even though there are a number of ways to run everything within a single Wild Apricot site, and you can kind of see those limitations on your screen now. Now, these truthfully tend to be the deciding factors about whether or not people would like to house their entire chapter organization structure in one account or on multiple accounts. But namely, banking can only be routed in one direction per Wild Apricot account. So if your chapters all have separate bank accounts and they need to do their finances that way, then they would effectively need multiple Wild Apricot accounts because there's no way to route payments after the fact in a single account scenario. I hope that makes sense. But the short version is that each Wild Apricot account can only route payments one way. So I have in the past seen this be a roadblock for organizations that are looking to house everybody in a single account. Likewise, the other major roadblock is that database information, although it can be segmented for use in reporting and for things like page access and event registration, in terms of the visibility of an admin to be able to see that data in the system, there's no way to kind of segment it to different chapters. So any admin that has membership management privileges on your account or a full admin privilege on your account would effectively be able to see data for everybody, regardless of which chapter they were in. So again, I've seen this be a roadblock in the past because sometimes chapter data needs to be kept separate from one another. But I've also seen the inverse where people actually, this is built into your organization structure and all data must be shared by all members anyway. In that case, it works really well. The last main disadvantage, I'm sure you've had a chance to look at it by now, is that it's like it or not, it's just going to be a little bit more complex than having a standard Wild Apricot operation. So that may be fine, and you may be a wizard with technical stuff, and you may have a great team behind you, and everything may be running smoothly. But you do want to consider 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, when you may have a new board and new volunteers and new staff come on board. You don't really want them to look at something and have no idea how it works. So you really have to factor these things in. Cost benefit is always important, but it's certainly the way to look at having multiple chapters all in one single Wild Apricot account. Now on to scenario 2, which is options when your chapters are considering or already have Wild Apricot accounts. And what I mean by this is that easily the most common scenario for me in my day-to-day work is that I will have somebody come to me and say, we've just discovered that we have about a dozen of our chapters on Wild Apricot. How we missed it in the past, I don't know, but we just figured it out. Hey, how do we get a discount? How do we start making that work for us now? So that's what I want to kind of present to you. Or likewise, if you are if you're a chapter, if you're from the national organization, you want to start deploying Wild Apricot down to your chapters, this would also be some useful information there. So I mentioned I was going to talk about the multi-chapter discount for Wild Apricot, and there's a reason that we have this in place. And as mentioned a little bit earlier, that's because it's oftentimes easiest for different chapters to have their own individual accounts there. But we do want to make that a little bit easier for you. So some of you may be on one of these already. Some of you may need to talk to your other chapters to see if you qualify. But we do have available discounts for organizations that have 5 or more accounts on Wild Apricot. So for example, the normal discount is the normal discount if you purchase 1 year of Wild Apricot in advance is 10%. But if you had 15 other chapters on Wild Apricot, then all 15 of you, or all 16 of you, I should say, would instead be able to get a 20% discount on that 1 year purchase. So when you reach these thresholds for the multi-chapter discounts, your entire organization benefits. And that's why it's kind of important to try and get everybody launched at the same time. That way, some people aren't coming in at like a 15% discount, whereas the late joiners enjoy all of the benefit and get a 25% discount. So I usually recommend trying to do it all together. It makes onboarding easier. I can certainly help everybody get set up all at the same time, and anybody at Wild Apricot can. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. Now I've spoken about API a couple of times now, but I just wanted to touch on it again because I really want to harp in that if you are considering a architecture where you have multiple Wild Apricot accounts for all of your chapters, and you need to start thinking about how to get these accounts integrated with one another, or at least talking and passing along the information to something, whether that's up to national or down to each other, whatever it is. That's where API really comes in handy. Nearly every single piece of data in Wild Apricot is accessible by API. It's just not always built in. It's not always designed to do that because we tried to make a self-contained system, whereas API is all about going off and doing things elsewhere. That being said, if you do have the ability or you have the budget to hire somebody to do it, you really can customize a lot of the actions. And it really enables you to be able to do things like integrate Wild Apricot with itself, or with things like Personify 360 or Community or A to Z, or pretty much any software out there, especially those that have other REST APIs. There are other things that can help you do this too. I'm not sure if you found the integration service Integromat, but that's a website out there that has a number of Wild Apricot templates and webhooks and other index protocols built right in to enable you to be able to do slightly more complicated things that involve multiple accounts or multiple services. So for example, on Integromat, you could customize it so that Wild Apricot can pass along information that can then be used in something like an additional email, or can be passed along information that can be then put into a PDF, for example. Again, things not built into Wild Apricot, but the information is certainly there, so it can be taken and used elsewhere. And just because we're talking about Integromat, I do want everybody to take a look at it for 2 reasons, really. Number one, I think it's really really useful for Wild Apricot, especially if you need to think of integration scenarios for other products. The other reason is it's largely community driven. And so our developers actually put in a bunch of templates just to start, but we've seen it grow since then. And we noticed that a lot of our users and yourselves, I'm sure many of you are in this room, have been adding other templates to these ones that are available for public use. So at the top of your screen right now, all of these ones that are in the lighter color, these are things that are actually built into something like Integromat already. And you can use it to do things like use Wild Apricot to get your payments list and have it forwarded somewhere else so that you can actually start actioning on it there. But the red ones at the bottom, these are things that don't yet exist but are theoretically possible with something like Integromat. So this is a pretty common question that I get, but is there any way to send SMS messages with Wild Apricot? The short answer is that with Wild Apricot, no, there's nothing built in to allow you to do SMS capability just yet. Although stay tuned, we have some surprises in the future there. What I'm trying to get at is with Integromat, you could potentially use that. All you really need to find is that program that's going to send the SMS, and then Integromat will help you to get the data and the circumstances from Wild Apricot so you can push it through to that separate program, which will then do it. I'm just using the SMS notification because it tends to ring true with people, but it really allows you to do a lot. There are some additional costs if you're going to be doing really common. I think it's priced based on the amount of calls you would make a day or something like that, the amount of automations per day or per hour, something like that. But there is a cost, there is a paywall somewhere, but it's also free below a point. So definitely check it out. Now, with other Wild Apricot resources, I really want to try and stress that we don't expect you to do all the work when you are onboarding chapters to Wild Apricot. In fact, I don't really want you to. I'd really rather you send them to us because we're happy to help. It's what we do on a day-to-day basis, and I have a ton of stuff that will make it easier for people, whether they do it individually or in a group, and I want to be able to offer that as best as I can to you. So I would recommend taking advantage of things like multi-chapter options and discounts by way of, first and foremost, this will always ring true for Wild Apricot, but our trial, our 30-day trial, is absolutely free. There's no risk, there's no commitment. You can open as many trial accounts as you want. So that's useful information for everybody as well. If you do want to test things, you can go ahead and open a new trial. It will warn you if you open a trial with the same email address you used the first time, but you can just click open the trial anyway, and it'll go ahead and open that for you. So for your new chapter admins, they're always able to, whenever they may find a free moment, go ahead and jump right into any number of free trials. They can start one, play with it, then open another one to actually get things started for their setup. So that's the easiest way to get started always. The other one is to take advantage of our Wild Apricot support. We have tons of videos, tons of tutorials, sessions like this at Personifest, as well as everything that I'm sure will be coming up throughout the rest of the year. But we really have a ton of stuff out there, and we're very, very happy to help every single one of your admins. So it doesn't have to just be you, the chapter, or the national organization's admin. It can be the chapter admins. It can be the chapter admins volunteers. We want to help everybody who's going to be using Wild Apricot because we want you to feel so comfortable when you are using Wild Apricot. So please always feel comfortable or always feel able to get in touch with us. Our door is always open. The other one that I would consider is if you can get a volunteer or maybe have somebody draw a short straw and get nominated as a chapter coordinator. And the reason that that's kind of important is that if we have a chapter coordinator that we can liaison with, it means that I can speak to one person who can then pass along information to all of the other chapters. Truthfully, it just makes my job easier. There's no responsibility for the coordinator, there's no contract or anything like that. It just makes it a lot easier to get things like this started, especially in a scenario where you are part of a chapter organization, but your organization doesn't yet have a discount with Wild Apricot. Most of the time it's because we can't get in touch with a coordinator from a national level just to get everything started. So if that's you, or if that sounds like somebody you know, please put them in touch with us. That's the best way to get started here and get everybody else started at the same time. Now, this has been on screen for a moment, but there are a couple of other ways to get help. Something that not everybody is aware of is that we can actually, if requested, clone your site. So that is often used for people who want to test new things out on their site. An average request may be, hey, can you clone my site? I want to play with a new background. Okay, here's your new site. Play with it. If you're happy, you can make the change on your original site. What a lot of people also don't realize, though, is that in a multi-chapter situation, and there are some of you, I'm sure, in this webinar that are using this, but what you can do is if one person is able to make a site template or wants to make a master copy that everybody can then take and it can be distributed to them, then we can help facilitate that. So we can clone that copy for you and help distribute it to your actual chapters. And why this is really useful is because I'm thinking of one community in particular that really impressed me here by making a master copy for all their chapters, but they replaced pretty much the entire website content with really detailed instructions. Click here to do this. When you are ready, do this next section, then go to this page. They basically put an entire tutorial manual right in that master copy itself. So that was really fantastic. I'm sure that helped their chapter admins. It's just an idea to throw out there. The other one is you may have seen in-program chat on Wild Apricot. That's something that we've been expanding more and more. So if it's not on your account yet, just give it a little bit of time and I'm sure it will roll out shortly. But that enables you to get in touch with all of us Apricots as quickly as you possibly can. And that means that your new chapter admins, when they don't know what they're doing and they want to ask some questions because they're a little confused, they can get in touch with the team right away and we can help them on the spot. So definitely take advantage of some of those. We honestly want to provide as much help as we can for all of your users. Some animations here. Now, how it typically looks when you're considering the project as a whole, and I have mentioned that group coordinator a couple times, is because we kind of hope to achieve it like this. Ideally, we would have a group coordinator from your organization, and that person would be the one who will speak to, I guess, me and the rest of the team here at Wild Apricot while we set up that multi-chapter discount. And I mentioned there's no contract or anything. There are very few terms. We really just kind of want to do it in a polite way where we can all be on the same page. So it's a, I think, one-page document. Long story short, that chapter coordinator can then take that discount and help deploy it to the chapters. So that's why we kind of need that coordinator as well, because we don't really want to, reach out to every single person individually. We'd rather it kind of comes from national and it sounds official, and that way it can have a little bit of it can just have a little bit of credence to it. But when it comes from the coordinator, it goes out to the chapter admins. It also gives us opportunities to do things like, let's set up a setup day for everybody all at once. We'll set up a virtual meeting. We can have everybody set up, and maybe Wild Apricot can even come on by and give us some tips in the meeting. The point is, things like that become possible when we have a coordinator to talk to, and I think that's hopefully, I hope a number of you are scrambling right now, just kind of texting whoever it is that may be that person, because they're going to be the right person to get it set up. Now, the chapter admins themselves, they'll be the ones that go and do a little bit of the customization for their own site, depending on whether they're starting from scratch or if they have a template that they're working with or what have you. They'll be the ones that need to get to know Wild Apricot a little bit. So, of course, they have all of the help that we could possibly offer. They'll be able to get in contact with us at any time. We can book calls with them. We'll be live in chat. Basically, we'll support them as if we would anybody else. But all they really have to do to get started on something like this is just complete the chapter billing form, which is something that ideally the coordinator would go and send to them and say, when you're ready, complete this, send it to Wild Apricot, and they'll get you started. So really, for the chapter admins, it's relatively easy. For myself and for the rest of us at Wild Apricot, well, I wouldn't say it's hard, but that's where our normal job starts. We want to be able to provide support and help so that everybody does learn the system well, but I also want to be able to do it in a way where your chapter admins are going to be able to draw from their own people, their own fellow admins, basically where everybody feels like they're learning together. That way it's not a race and people are leapfrogging over one another. I kind of support the graduation theory. So for me, it's something that I've found to be really helpful in the past. I hope it sounds appealing to you. And as with anything else, if there is something we can do like that for your organization, always stay in touch at sales@wildapricot.com or send me a message here. I'm not sure how that works, but we'll see what we can do. This will be a strange year for all of us, but I think that it can also be a year that we can do a lot of new things as well. Now, just quickly before we start to wrap up, I don't know if you've seen the Wild Apricot Bootcamp, but this is a great way for your new admins to learn Wild Apricot and really kind of specialize or learn the specialty knowledge they may need to do their particular task. And of course, the example here I'm referring to is if you have a new board come on in a couple of years and they need to figure out how Wild Apricot is actually working, then maybe you can send the treasurer to something like lesson number 2, which is all about managing finances, and they can just spend less than half an hour catching themselves up there. But I really think it's a great way for quick learning, on-demand learning, and something that you can you can see, you can learn the best practices for, and then you can also see in-program examples. So I do hope it helps there. And of course, the referral program, in case, I know everybody knows how a referral program works, but this is mostly for you organizations who may not have 5 accounts on Wild Apricot yet, but you still kind of deserve the opportunity to try and save if you can. So if that is you, then don't forget that every single Wild Apricot account has the ability to earn referral commission. If you have somebody open a new account with your referral code, and I do believe it's in every account, you just go to dashboard and then referrals, but you'll earn 10% of their costs for 2 years. So if they purchase a global plan, for example, then your organization will be earning $60 a month for 2 years. So it's a pretty good way to be a hero locally and possibly pay for your entire Wild Apricot subscription. Obviously, I don't want you to go knocking down doors or anything, but I just want it to be fresh in your mind in case the opportunity does arise. That way you don't miss out on anything that you could be earning as commission there. And then lastly, I guess, as we wrap up, this is the one that I would kind of turn your attention to if it sounds like you may need a multi-chapter approach of Wild Apricot and the word integration has popped up at least once, or if you know you're going to be looking at API or SSO work, or even if you know you just need a new website but you don't want to do the development yourself, please check out the Wild Apricot partners. I know that most of you are probably in this webinar. They're probably in many of the Personifest webinars and are definitely on places like the Wild Apricot Tribe and other places that they can respond to questions. I think some partners are even presenting in Personifest, so definitely reach out to them if you have any questions. A number of them have had tons of experience with website development as well as making these more complex integrations between accounts. It's definitely possible to get things like shared reporting set up between multiple Wild Apricot accounts. And the way you do that is likely through some of these partners. So check them out, definitely see what you can get done there. I hope you are able to get some good results. Now, I wanted to show you something that this was kind of a last minute addition to my presentation. I can see I'm really getting close to time, so I have to be quick here. I have seen a couple of organizations make some really fantastic, I'm going to call them landing pages for their Wild Apricot discounts. So I just made a bit of an example here. This is just an example of what I've seen some of you do, because you've made pages on your own organization's websites that are saying things like, we're happy to announce our discount with Wild Apricot. But then I've also helped a couple of you to set up or I've given you permission to use some of these assets on that page so that you can actually have things like boot camps and some of the other tutorials and links to support. You can even have logins to Wild Apricot on pages like that itself. So if you're from one of these organizations that has this set up, I really think they're fantastic. If it's not something that you have set up, but it could be useful, then please let me know, or feel free to kind of take a run at it. But if you just let me know by email and you get in touch with coaches or sales at wildapricot.com, we can talk about some of the assets. And if there is something you do want to use, we'll figure out a solution there. But otherwise, I think it's a fantastic way to sort of unveil a membership or your new discount to your members and have everybody have something of a landing page to get forward with. Now, we're running towards the end of the session, and I'm noticing that, well, whether habitually or from experience, but I happen to have planned this for exactly 1 hour, which is too bad because I was hoping to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So I'm really hoping that I have been answering questions throughout this webinar, because if not, we're not going to have too much time right now to do it. But that's okay, because we're always available to answer questions. And if you have any questions at all about the multi-chapter management or the discounts or setting things up for deploying Wild Apricot to new chapters, please just email me at sales@wildapricot.com. If not, I think you can get a copy of these slides at info@personifiedcorp.com, and you'll always be able to stay in touch with us. I'll try and make a post or two on the tribe or something just to thank everybody for being here. But these have been unprecedented circumstances, and it has really been it's been different for a lot of us. So I can do nothing but thank you so much, not only for the things you do normally, and this is something I don't have the opportunity all the time to say, but you are here taking time out of your day to benefit an organization that has all of these members that don't see the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis. but I see it and I know how hard you're working. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all your members, on behalf of everybody at Personify, everybody at Wild Apricot. You are making the world a better place. And all I'm doing is trying my best to help. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to see many of you again. I can't wait to hear from you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Personifest. Have a great day, everybody.